One of the things I like the most about being an action figure collector is making our own rules. The fact that we decide where things go on our shelf and which versions of what character we buy. It allows us to be creative in our hobby in terms of not just acquisition, but display. And sometimes better lines come along and replace older ones. Sometimes you wind up collecting things you didn't even try to collect just because suddenly you woke up and realized, oh, wow, I own every core member of the Avengers. Guess I better buy a Hawkeye. All right, so in terms of making rules, for me personally, one of the things I collect is Marvel Legends 90s spider villains. So you'll notice I don't have Mr. Negative. He's a current villain from, the 2000 teens, 20s, and not part of my collection. It's a rule I've made, and that satisfies me. I don't feel like he is lacking. Now, when collecting toys, my buddy Adam Paulus has this concept of just different enough to make you angry. What I mean by that is not your one and done figures. There's a lot of characters that will probably never get another toy, or it could be, decades until a second version is made, at least especially in the same outfit. This is with, your C-list and D-list characters. When you're dealing with an A-list character, well, you're looking at probably infinite remakes. And a big part of this is to make sure that the next generation can get a character that they love. And by generation, I mean every 6 years you get a new generation of children because they grow out of their toys and now you have new children. So it happens pretty readily in the toy industry, which is why you see main characters done over and over again. It also saves on tooling and costs. But as a collector, so not a kid, there's something we do that to ourselves where we become obligated to buy figures that, as my buddy Adam says, are just different enough. I mean, a major character can have different outfits, and that makes them very unique. I mean, these 3 Wolverines are extremely different, and from different eras in the character, and they all have legitimate stories and, a fan base based around that. Wolverine is a A-list character, and getting out as many Wolverines as possible, especially ones that look very different, is really good because from a parent buying perspective, you want to have what's called different silhouettes. The toys look different. If they look very similar, well, that doesn't appeal to parents. But for collectors, here you have on the left a yellow one with cell shading and on the right a gold one without. This is what I would call new hat collecting from the infamous Simpsons episode where Malibu Stacy gets a new hat and everyone wants her for that. When you make just a tiny change, but as collectors, we're going to buy it anyway. I mean, look, Han got a new belt and then a new necklace. That's new hat collecting right there in terms of Star Wars. Boba Fett's a really good example, and this is one that actually affected me personally as a collector. And there are multiple different ways that, Boba Fett can be sold. He does change his outfit between movies, and, well, now that, we've got the expanded Disney Plus, that's a whole other thing. Now, this particular Boba Fett eluded me for the longest time. It was part of the Movie Heroes 2012 release that was going to promote Attack of the Clones and Phantom Menace in 3D. It was the exact same figure that I already had, this one, from the vintage collection a year earlier. But the new one, on this white card with Darth Maul, had a rope. A rope! Yep, it had a little mechanism to make it more kid-friendly, taking the exact same sculpt that had been released just as a highly articulated Boba Fett on a vintage card, and now ran a rope through it in order to have a zipline feature for the kiddies. Totally makes sense. And boy, in my mind, did this qualify as just different enough. And much like when toy lines don't or get pushed out of retail, for various reasons, product then gets shipped overseas. This Masters of the Universe wave has shown up in Australia because U.S. retailers didn't take it. Same thing happened with my beloved Boba Fett with string. It was part of this wave that was leading into the Attack of the Clones 3D release, which never happened. So the toy line got dropped. And this wave, which got produced, much like that last wave of Masters of the Universe Origins, this one went to Canada. And everyone knows I can't go to Canada due to the incident of 2013. So I was basically out of luck until I was able to network around and connect with other collectors to acquire this piece. And it's odd that it's become like a favorite Boba Fett of mine simply because it has a piece of string and it took me so long to get it. And that's pressure that didn't come from the toy company. It's not like this figure was marketed to me. No one put a gun up to my head and said, you have to buy this Boba Fett toy. All of this pressure to complete a collection and under new hat regulations comes from ourselves. So the question might be then, well, why do we do it? And I think a lot of it comes from the collect 'em all mentality that was part of toy culture going back to when we were kids in the 80s. That was the glory days of cross-sells, when you could see an entire line on the back of a figure's package, and it literally told you to collect them all. These days, getting cross-sells, well, they are shrinking, if not disappearing entirely. And it's a darn shame, because this was how you learned about more figures you could get and what a complete collection looked like. So you had something to compare it to and know if you did indeed succeed in the challenge the packaging taunted you with and collected them all. Nowadays, if you want to figure out if you have them all, you pretty much have to buy a coffee table book or get on this newfangled internets thing and, look up figures one at a time. It's one of the reasons actually I love coffee table books about action figures. But we should still have cross-sells. This is, it pains me that cross-sells have gone away. So not only because, they're beautiful images, but they represented, as I've said, trophies to us. Having everything in a cross-sell was winning. And a lot of us don't have sports trophies or moon trophies or movie-making trophies at home. Some of us do. It's like putting together a puzzle and not having all the pieces. For someone who wants to collect them all and wants to feel the sense of achievement that comes with that,
oh, it's a donkey.
Well, it requires getting that last piece. And if there's a piece missing, it just becomes this beacon that's constantly like, not here, not here, not here. So even the smallest change to a figure, adding a new hat, new string, new belt, new necklace, for new hat collectors, that makes that figure a required part of their collection. And of course the question is, just how deep do you go with new hat? Do you go with every possible deco variation, every variation of an accessory? It's almost a bottomless hole if you start getting into variant collecting, because, well, it's enough to make you, go mad with the number of different versions of figures, especially as you get back to the 80s. So while there's a difference between variant collectors and what I would call new hat collectors, where they're getting it if it's legitimately a new piece, not just a, maybe a slight paint change, etc. We all make our own rules, though, in the end. And for so long, this Boba Fett was my white whale, and it's amazing how a figure aimed at kids with a simple thing as an added piece of string became one of my most beloved Star Wars figures, simply because it took me the longest to get of any figure in my collection. Really odd how, toy collecting can affect us that way. So my question then back to you all is, are you a new hat collector? And are you a new hat collector for all of your lines or some? For me, with Star Wars 3 3/4 original trilogy, I am. With Marvel Legends, I'm not. And, that's one of the wonderful things about collecting, making our own rules. So what are you all hat in on? What toy lines will you get no matter what difference the figure is? Obviously, characters have to come out over and over again for, new generations of kids, but for collectors who collect them all, small change can mean chasing down a lot of variants of the same figure. Thanks for watching, thanks for sharing, and I'll see you guys in the next one.